right, well, shall we get started and then roll out? Yeah.
Recording in progress.
We'll sit down. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, January 21st meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission. Start with a roll call, please. Here.
Commissioner Cole.
Present.
Commissioner Hickman.
Here.
Commissioner R.F. Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner R.S. Johnson was another.
All right. First item is approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes from November 19th. Do they have any changes they wanted to make or corrections or additions?
Approve.
Okay, motion to approve. Second. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimously. Now approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes anybody would like to make to tonight's agenda? No.
I'll just make a comment, as I mentioned before, because of some, I need to leave it at the clock, but I'm sure we'll be done way before that anyway, so it should not be a problem.
No problem. All right. All right, not seeing any changes to the agenda. We'll keep going through. Any items from the floor? Now is a time for anybody, either in person or on Zoom, to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. We ask that you limit yourself to about 3 minutes. So is anybody the burning desire to an item from the floor? Seeing any online? Wait. Or in person, no worries. We approved the agenda, right? Yeah, okay. We're catching up. All right, no, we didn't.
No, we did not.
We did not, okay.
So I move to approve the agenda.
All right.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimously passes. All right, then items from the floor. Didn't have any, so I guess we'll move on to tonight's agenda. And number one, the ADU ordinance. Trevor.
All right. Well, I have to apologize because I just noticed that the this PDF version doesn't have my comments or questions in it. So we'll have to just go through it, and I will hopefully remember where some of the things I wanted. I'm sure this won't be the last thing. So I mean, just overall, this AD ordinance has been maybe my least favorite thing I would do. Saying something. But to marriage the state regulations and coastal act requirements and like Trinidad's design review protection is just, it's been so frustrating. So we thought we had an ordinance that you guys had reviewed, and Coastal Commission staff had reviewed. I worked really closely with Coastal Commission staff, including their housing liaison. And then we submitted that to Department of Housing and Community Development late in 2004. And they now have approval authority over ADU ordinances. Obviously, this has to go through the Coastal Commission as well. I worked for some time trying to address their comments and reconcile things, and I decided I couldn't make it work. And so tried to come up with another approach, and I've been working with, again, like Coastal Commission staff. This time their housing liaison has taken this, at least conceptually, to HCD, and because they meet regularly and kind of talk about some of these things. So there does seem to be buy-in on this approach. And so essentially we're dividing up the city into a limited ADU area where these are the areas that are closest to the bluffs. So they have the stability issues, they have the infiltration issues, they have view issues, they've got coastal access, parking issues, so all those kind of things. And we're calling that the limited area, and we're only allowing, or I should say, we would streamline only a subset of ADUs within that limited ADU area. And then everywhere else, just defer to the state regulation. And that's easier to do now because of some of the changes in the state law. For example, it's eliminated appeals to the Coastal Commission for ADUs. So, one of the things that is a complicating factor is the different permitting requirements. So if you look at that figure, and I know it's got a lot going on it. This isn't going to be the final figure, but it just kind of shows some of the different things. That orange and the yellow background area, those are appealable versus not appealable. And so previously there would have had to be different permitting requirements and notification requirements in those areas. Now we don't have to worry about that as far as I know. So I know it's hard to see, but the light gray hatching is the limited ADU area. The dark hatching is basically open space areas and areas where, and the harbor area. So you can't have an ADU there anyway. And then everywhere else, again, it's going to defer to state regulations. So that's kind of the approach we've taken. There are, under the state regulations, there are two subsets of ADUs. That's another, the state regulations are very difficult and cumbersome on right. So there's provisions for a city can adopt an ordinance and allow ADUs, and they put limits on how much limit those kind of maximum and things like that. And then there's another subset that are basically the state mandated exempt ADUs. You have to allow them no matter what, regardless of where they are. So both of those subsets are reflected in the ordinance. I guess maybe I'll just, since my comments and questions, I'll kind of go through them. Definitions are mostly just straight out of the state code. One question I have, and this is, the planning commission can weigh in, but it's also a question for coastal commission staff, is the cap. So we had the cap to kind of limit the number of ADUs based on our water studies and some other things, because the coastal commission wants us to show it, have all the resources and services to provide for those ADUs. With this new approach, we maybe don't need the cap. So that might be something, again, I'm going to ask coastal commission staff how they feel. But I think that's something that is maybe flexible in this ordinance.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You said that this map is not the final map, it's going to be changed. Who's going to change?
I'll change it. I mean, mostly I'm going to take out a lot of the stuff. It's got too much information in it, but we created the map, first we layered on all these the setbacks. So, we've had a different version of this map, but didn't have the hatch marks. We had it with our last ADU ordinance because it shows the bluff setbacks, and it shows the limited infiltration area, and it shows slope stability, and it shows the appealable area. So all those affected ADUs. And this time I just overlaid those hatching
Okay.
on the map, which made it very difficult to
The
read.
last time we looked at this, that would have been the time we should have asked that question. That's good.
Well, you probably weren't on the committee.
Probably, yeah. We haven't done this in a while, yeah.
Well, the other-
Okay, so these people did it. All right. Way to go, guys.
The other new layer I put on here is the view protection overlays and those. So, some overarching questions I have for coastal commission are, exactly all the different permitting requirements that we need to have in there. One thing I was sort of debating is some ordinances have an ADU permit, and other ordinances it's just a building permit. And so that would be one question. Sometimes I think it's confusing to not have something called an ADU permit. Just because it's easy, it's its own thing to refer to, so, I might add an ADU permit to this section 175404. That's something that the planning commission can weigh in on. Coastal resource protection standards are primarily dictated by coastal commission staff. They wanted something in here for cultural resources protection, but it has to be. All standards have to be objective for ADUs, so it can't be, and we don't have a map of where there's cultural resource areas, so. I added, having a qualified cultural monitor. I don't know if that's necessary. Again, that's something I'm gonna discuss with. One thing to note is almost all these standards, you can exceed them. You just have to come to the planning commission with a regular permit. So we're streamlining everything that fits in these little boxes. Health and safety requirements, the septic things, one of the notes I had is I think for the hydrologic study, so in the health and safety requirements at page 9 of 20, page 22, under the OWTS number 3. I don't think this is necessarily specific to ADUs. So that might be something that we'll consider adding in the OWTS ordinance, but maybe not.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
It's like. It says for any AG outside of the infiltration area that will increase wastewater flows. And then it goes into that, well, doesn't every additional resident increase wastewater flow? I mean, if you got an AG, that means more people.
Well, and that is one of my concerns, but technically not necessarily, because if you're converting a bedroom in your house and you're using that for your ADU, so you're basically decreasing the number of bedrooms in your house and adding an ADU. So the number of bedrooms doesn't change. So that means the design flow doesn't change. But to me, it means there are realistically going to be more people. So that was one thing I have a concern.
Sort it out, more definition, or just pretend like there's no increased sewage flow was increased.
Well, so the county, you may know, the county recently revised in the last year or so, revised their interpretation of their regulations, so that, because previously they required a minimum 2-bedroom flow for every dwelling unit. So 2 1-bedroom dwellings would have to have a 4-bedroom system, which would preclude a lot of people from having ADUs in Trinidad.
Yes.
But they recently scaled that back to say, nope, just number of bedrooms, no matter how many dwellings. And so that means 2 1-bedroom ADUs could have a 2-bedroom system, even if they're large. And that one I was concerned about. So I would, we talked about the OWTS ordinance and maybe requiring a minimum for the first unit to have at least a 2-bedroom system. So then you'd have to have a 3-bedroom system. And I think that gives enough factor of safety for.
I'm sure all that's true. It's just that it seems like maybe some other criterion other than just the general will increase wastewater flows. Maybe will increase number of bedrooms, or might require. I mean, something more specific than.
Yeah, or at least, or expect, or design flows.
Something.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just increase design.
We can get more into detail with that when we get to this page. We'll just kind of
Okay.
if it's all right, we'll just kind of Trevor get through her staff report, and then we'll probably end up going page by page through this and dive deeper into all these things.
So then starting on page 23 of the packet, these are essentially just the state standards. See, there's one place. So in section 175408. So there's one, again, the way these state standards work is really difficult to kind of follow through with things, but the state has one standard, but I'm not sure if it applies to these ADUs or if it applies to their exempt ADUs where you can't have rules that would result in an ADU smaller than 850 square feet for one bedroom or 1,100 square feet for one bedroom or more. To look again, question fits, but I think the planning commission has some leeway of whether you want to have this 1,200 square feet or 50% of the floor area, or there's a different set of criteria that you can use based on. Basically, these are all just straight from the state code. Same with JADUs, page 25. The exempt ones are on page 26. So again, just following straight from the state code.
But we'll get, this is just a general question. How much leeway do we have to modify the state codes?
So for the ones that are exempt, so 1754-100, I would say 0 leeway. For the other ones, and JADUs maybe not, I don't think you have much leeway on JADUs. For the general standard 1754-080, you can add objective standards.
Well, I guess my question is, I go through this, it takes an attorney to figure this out. And maybe more than one. And I look at some of the state requirements, and I don't have any trouble with the numbers, but I do have the trouble with the way in which they explain this stuff. And I can see, and I don't want to get into a lot of detail because we can talk about it, but I can see where we could, in my mind, we could adjust the wording to make it more clear as to what's going on. But I think, I don't know how that will work.
Could adjust the wording on the organization, yes.
Okay.
I mean, some of it's straight out of the state code, but I think there is some leeway for that. And I think, there's some, there's definitely the way the city administers this. There's flexibility in terms of the city providing, more user-friendly guidance for ADUs that's outside of this ordinance. So then we get to section 1754-110. And I'm still debating with Coastal Commission staff on how to do this. I think actually it's easier to do this in the ordinance than in, I think I mentioned the coastal development permit exclusion. And there's just so many layers to this, it gets really confusing. I think it might be just easier to do this in the ordinance, but they're based on the current exclusions. So the city's exclusion order allows up to a 500 square foot, 15-foot tall accessory structure with no design review or CDP. So someone can put in anywhere in town and do that. So already, and then so the height, and then the grading, the 1,000 square feet of surface area, or 50 cubic yards. We want to be able to apply that to septic systems. And then, so those are currently included in the exceptions. And so that's what I kind of modeled these restrictions on. So if you have an ADU that kind of fits in those limits, then you get, basically a building permit. So ministerial approval, there's no hearing, there's no, there might still have to be noticing. It gets weird when it's a CDP because you still have to notify the neighbors, but there is no appealing process. So, and then, I've added parking standards here. There's setbacks. I think that's something that's important in this ordinance on this limited ADU area is to maintain off-street parking. Street parking for public access. So, that's where, this is outside of the state regulations. This is something totally different. Permitting procedures, time limits, again, those are fairly, the wording and stuff can change, but those are kind of dictated by coastal commission requirements.
Okay, so we just dive in page by page and go through this?
I have one quick question about the staff report itself. My feeble brain is having trouble contextualizing this paragraph about the exclusion order. I was hoping you could maybe share some insight there.
Okay. So there are the Coastal Act regulation. The Coastal Act has exemptions from CDPs. They're fairly generic. And so the Coastal Act regulations has exceptions to the exemptions. So for example, the Coastal Act has an exemption for improvements to single family residences or repair and maintenance. And then the regulations kind of put some limits on that. So not repair and maintenance if it's too close to the bluff or a beach, or improvements to single family residences if they're over a certain size, things like that. And then separate, which our LCP does not have those in them. And then they have a separate process for exclusions, and these are specific. The exclusions are specific to each jurisdiction, and the Coastal Commission issued an exclusion order for Trinidad in 1980, and I think amended it in 83. It's in our LCP, although from what I understand, it's actually not supposed to be in the actual code. And it has a higher standard of review. So I think it requires a 2/3 vote instead of just 50-50, and finding it more stringent because you're basically excluding all these projects. So I've seen some. I would love to redo the city's exclusion order to include again, certain septic system repairs, certain vegetation removal, certain lot line adjustments, things that are just so minor. But again, it's a high bar to pass. So I don't know how realistic that. So does that help at all?
I suppose so, but then you could also, I think I got it.
It is confusing.
A question I've got about the staff report is much of the limited ADU area is within the view protection overlay zone. I know there's other factors, of course, which govern the limited ADU developments in that area. But I guess my broader question is the other entities are sort of on board with that, with the creation of a limited ADU area.
Yes, but not for private view protection. So that is definitely an area where I have found it difficult to kind of write these regulations because I the state allows attached ADUs up to 25 feet, so that's permitted ministerially down here where the city's kept things low and, people have bought property based on view. So that's, but the state doesn't care about that. Neither does the Coastal Commission. It's public views. But it's still a scenic view sensitive area still. And it still coincides with the, limited infiltration area, the places that are closed. So it coincides with these other limitations.
Just one component which contributes potentially to other overall limitation.
Shall we launch in then? Do you want feedback at this point, Trevor, or do people have feedback on the figure, or is it too soon since you have plans to revise it?
Sure. I think I would probably. I'm not sure much has to be on this figure other than that light gray area, really. Maybe the dark gray, but or maybe it would be a zoning, maybe it would be on a zoning map because ADUs are only allowed on zones that allow residences. So it wouldn't be ADUs aren't allowed on open space, special environment. Those sorts of parcels anyway, so maybe it's the gray hatching overlaid on the zoning. Sure, I welcome input on what should be on the figure.
Can you remind me what the LID acronym stands for?
Low impact development. So basically that is referring to infiltrating stormwater runoff. So when the city was doing its stormwater project and it developed its water model, kind of ran this area. One of the things that the city got a grant to do or was supposed to do under its stormwater requirements was to encourage people to infiltrate stormwater. But that's not necessarily practical everywhere in Trinidad. So they use the water model to find an area where it is practical to implement. And so that is the, inside that red box, or I should say outside that red box, is where you can infiltrate. And within that red box, which is basically the bluff areas, is where you shouldn't be infiltrating a lot of stormwater.
You're really just infiltrating OWTS water.
The view protection overlay zone, that's established elsewhere in other code, or is that sort of arbitrarily?
It is it's in the city's view and vegetation ordinance, which is not certified by the Coastal Commission.
So that was a question I had about this. How does all of the the view protection overlay zone is from the view and vegetation ordinance. So how do they mesh with the ADU ordinance? As you pointed out, in some cases, it sounds like there would be a huge conflict between view and vegetation ordinance and ADU allowable heights, for example.
Well, the view and vegetation ordinance really only applies to vegetation, but I think, it's even though it hasn't been certified by the Coastal Commission, it is an area where the city has sat down and said, this is the area that's view sensitive. And at least for private views, really the only difference it makes is this lower corner of Underwood. So this lower corner of Underwood is okay to infiltrate, but it's within the views and vegetation zone. So those are the only parcels that the view and vegetation overlay zone picks up into this limited area. Because everywhere else within the view protection overlay zone is either limited LID or within the bluff setback or soil slope stability.
I got one question about the accuracy of the base layer on this map, because I know in the last year or two, there's been various lot line adjustments, like that parcel at the end of Underwood is now not just one large parcel, right? And then there's other things down in the near the foot of the pier.
Well, I've actually, that has recently come up as we need to revise all our maps to remove the Rancheria Harbor properties. Those are no longer in the city. But yes, we periodically update the parcels layers. I haven't done that in a couple of years, but there's been a few years.
I'm just thinking for simplicity for the intended end user of this, map attached to the ordinance would be the city limits, the limited zone, and the non-limited zone. They're kind of the big things that somebody's going to need to know. And then within that is going to be a conversation with you as the planner or the city as the applicant. You're going to learn more detail that way, I would think. That would be my suggestion to keep it clean. It's simple.
Yeah, I would agree with that, except that I think it's also probably somewhat important to know areas where there's local jurisdiction versus the coastal appeal area.
Isn't that though captured by the limited in the?
No, but ADUs are not appealable to the coastal commission, so it's kind of moot for ADUs.
And that's the same for ADUs? Okay.
And that's a recent, that just changed, I think, in 2025.
That's any ADU whatsoever.
That's a good question, whether it's in the ADU or whether it's just the state ADUs that are consistent with the state. I think it's just but that's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah, well, I'm all in favor of keeping the map simple.
Yeah. John here.
Just a minute.
Shall we begin through the ordinance then? Back at page 14. Anything on 14?
I just, for my question earlier, I think the LID needs a reduction there. It appears first in number 9 in the document, but maybe it should be spelled out before it gets accurate.
There are a lot. I did not spend a lot of time doing those kind of edits on this ordinance, but I think it's good to. I still am happy to have those pointed out because then I don't have to. My terminology, I refer to JADs, sometimes I spell it out. So I didn't spend a lot of time cleaning that.
I had a question, just kind of the purpose of the findings section. I think as I read it, it's kind of stating the city's position on ADUs and JADUs, and the way it's ordered and the way it kind of is written doesn't immediately trump it to me that the city's interested in ADUs and JADUs, which personally is contrary to the direction I think we should be. I think we should be supporting those. An example like finding number 15, I think should be the lead, not the end. But we should lead with saying we desire to promote this, if that's the will. That's me, again, my opinion. And then I had a question about 12, where you talk about parking being a concern. And I hear that, but I also recall our discussions when we were doing the parking study, and where I thought the consensus and kind of the result of that was that we don't really have a parking problem in Trinidad. But here we're saying, well, but we do have a parking problem, so we've got to regulate it. This is more just a commentary. I don't have an answer here.
So the purpose of the findings is more to, I think, justify the limited ADU area. But I do agree, they weren't written in any particular order. I think an old version of the ordinance had some of these findings. So yeah, I think it would be good to start with the promotion of ADUs, but you know, there's these other things. In terms of parking, I think the real issue is that one of the findings was that there are a number of streets that don't have on-street parking that are near coastal access areas. And so it's important to maintain off-street parking requirements in those locations so that they're not Pacific Avenue, so they're not parking up on Edwards and taking up that public.
Anything else in the finding section? Anybody? All right, then getting into the section / definitions here, packet page 15, 16. I just a refresher because it's been a minute since we saw this last, just to confirm a JADU has to be it can only be located within a single family residence.
Yeah.
It's located in an accessory building, then by definition, it is now an ADU versus a junior ADU.
Well, no, well, that's a good question. And that was one of the things that I thought was interesting from the HCD comments is that the last version of our ordinance actually relaxed some of the restrictions on JADUs and HCDs. You can't go either direction. But so, yes, so JADUs have to be within the existing living space of a residence. But if that residence has detached living space, that can be an ADU.
Could be a JD.
A JADU, yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
JADU, yes.
So then for this section, I think that definition isn't necessarily as all encompassing. It says proposed single family dwelling, or I don't know if I'm making sense. I feel like when you say that, my mind went to it has to be within your single family, not your detached living space.
But your detached living space is part of your single family dwelling.
Okay.
And that's how we have been permitting them.
Okay.
As part of the floor area of your residence.
So with that in mind, again, it goes back to what I made a comment earlier. It would seem to me that an explanation or an example might help in a case like this. Because actually we're talking about two different configurations of JADUs. One that's within a single family residence and another which can be in another building on the property.
It could be in a detached building, but only if it's already permitted living space.
Yeah, and it's those kind of explanations that I think would help people understand what the hell this means.
Yeah.
Because I took it the same way you did, that it's got to be within the
Structure, right? Yeah.
Now, that might be something that the planning, I mean, if you guys feel strongly that it should only be the main part of the structure, that might be a possibility under the state rules. If you think that, but if you think that converting a detached living space to a JADU should technically be an ADU. I mean, the difference is.
Oh, if it matters.
Yeah.
Because you can have a 500 square foot ADU.
Right.
So.
Okay. Anything else in those definitions? All right, then I think that takes us to page 17, purpose and intent, 1754-010. I'm going on from there. I have some questions about the cap on the number of ADUs, and I know you said we might be able to get rid of that, parking that. If we keep a cap, we'll start with that premise. Clarifying that that is an aggregate total between all the areas, making that very clear at the beginning where it says the number of new ADUs, about the third sentence in. Just really, because it just says the number, it doesn't say that both, combined within kind of like the STR ordinance, we have the maximum caps, within the different areas. Just making sure that's really clear and kind of consistent with how we do that. And then a follow-up question, is there a map? I know you officially, unofficially went through and kind of identified spots where you thought it was likely that an ADU or JADU an ADU really could be built or added. Does that map exist so we know where potential opportunities are?
I did not, because, I mean, you could easily map all the parcels over a certain size or something like that. But even that is, it's gonna depend on the existing building footprint and the soil suitability and all those kind of things. The 36 came from, was just an assumption from the water demand assessment, where I just assumed that a quarter of the parcels over 8,000 square feet would have an ADU, which I think is a high assumption. Don't think we're gonna hit the cap.
Right.
However, the thing that bothers me about this is then says the next sentence is that ADU and JADUs that do not meet the definition of development or that are excluded from the coastal development permit shall not be subject. So I'm trying to figure out what was the analysis that got us even to the 36, because this would suggest we could have much, much more, many, many more. And
So the Coastal Commission has been pretty careful. If it's going to increase water use, if anything that's going to increase the intensity of use is development. So it's going to be a very limited subset that is going to, not require septic improvements. So that's a big one. It's not going to add bedrooms. It's not going to add any square footage. It would have to be a very limited subset that the Coastal Commission would consider not development, that would not. But yes, you are right. So, I think JADUs and in particular, like carving out of existing space is something that people will take advantage of. I think adding a kitchen, we've talked about, whether that should require, septic potentially improvements. At least someone's going to have to bring their system to current code. They don't have to expand it. So, even some of these ones created from existing space are still going to be development.
so am I correct in saying that the cap, if we continue to have a cap, is based on essentially the water study?
Yes.
Would that be useful to just somehow refer to as to the rationale for the cap? Or is that too much? Am I reading too much into that?
I don't know if the ordinance is the place to refer to where that comes from. I did do a write-up that sort of justified the cap and that explained it there. But we could say based on water demand assessment.
Well, I think it goes back to whether or not we wind up having a cap or not. So
How do you guys feel about a cap?
I don't have an issue with the cap either way, because I don't think we're gonna hit lifespan present. But maybe people feel like they're running out or something.
I'm not clear on the intent, Because there's the, you end up anywhere near 36 new dwelling units. Overall impact, that's development. I mean, it's,
Yes, which is why the coastal commission wanted it in the first place. So, so the first time Trinidad submitted an AD ordinance to the coastal commission way back in. Something along with the first the ordinance. They sent like this 15-page letter of all these analyses that they wanted for all this increased development in Trinidad, and water was one of the biggest ones. So that's why this cap is in there, because it puts limits on things, and we can show them that we do have enough water for that. We have, infiltration and septic capacity to a degree. But, that's the purpose.
okay, so kind of what I heard you say is, you've got a cap, coastal commission is gonna be good with this. If you take the cap out, are they gonna then get back involved and say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's more issues than just water?
Possibly. So that's one question I have for them right now is, I put this in there for them originally. Last time I met with them, they're like, well, do we still need a cap for this limited ADU area? So I don't know, you tell me. So.
I don't think you want to use something like water as an excuse. If there's more, we know a lot of people who live here have other issues, right? They're not thinking about water use being holding this. They don't want that many more people, that many more cars coming and going. Yeah. So why not just say there's a cap, or there's not? Put it on a reason.
Well, so I think, because the coastal commission wanted a cap, so we came up with a cap, and to justify the cap to HCD, it had to be based on something.
It's kind of made up.
Oh, no.
Is that the objective of the city council, for example? I mean,
But it's based on something that we can put.
I appreciate it based on an issue that you can quantify, which is rare. All these other things are subjective. Okay.
Well, the coastal commission has not, worried, they have not brought up concerns about extra people driving through town. That's not the coastal commission's not worried about that. They're worried about water.
We're answering to the other citizens here.
Yes, eventually, yes.
With that in mind, one of the, I guess, concerns as we're talking more about the concept of a cap is if we place a cap, great, fine. The coastal commission also is very interested in us annexing visitor services areas and going up that way. And if the landscape of the city changes and we become geographically larger, or we have additional water supply capacity from whatever source, whichever controversial source you want to choose, because there's several out there, right? What then? We have to come back and deal with this all over again. And so that's where I have a little bit of heartache as we're having this conversation with this has been my entire, tenure on the planning commission. This has been we've not been able to go through this. And I certainly don't have the tenure that, yourself and Richard have with this issue. So I'm hesitant to put something into that then is going to could be potentially problematic for somebody else sitting up here down the road and open this all over that.
This would be a fairly easy amendment, but yeah, it's.
The coastal commission and HCD, right?
It does have to go to two agencies.
Yeah.
I just want to say one other thing about this water issue. So there's in the wings of multifamily development being looked at. So that's going to take, what's the equivalent number of people there away from this 36?
It won't. So, if you look,
I mean, the additional water is going to have to be supplied. I don't know how many units that is or anything, but okay, so the city has said we've got enough water to serve that.
Yeah, so if you look at the water demand assessment, I accounted for development on all those vacant parcels.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that I'm in favor of a cap, if for no other reason than it gives us some agency when the city already has so little agency over the development of ADUs. Maybe that's not a good enough reason, but it's, I think, maybe an ancillary benefit, if you will.
And I think it could, I think there will be people who are concerned about density and traffic and those kind of things. So having a cap.
Again, it does seem a bit arbitrary, especially since we don't really know how many potential ADUs could be built in town. But I guess that's a separate question.
Double-digit numbers in a town this size will always tend to be exciting, right? I mean, 36 sounds like a huge number. I mean, you know what I mean? If you think about the STR ordinance where that's gotten walked back down to, I mean, a really big number.
Well, I guess it'd be pretty relatively easy to permit 36J ADUs,
Mhm.
but actually ADUs. But yeah, it seems unlikely.
No, I agree.
But yeah, and how many people, there has definitely been an increase in interest in ADUs in Trinidad over the last several years. But I don't know how many people would really want them, especially a J80.
Yeah, JAD is a very special
Yeah.
circumstance. If you're not renting a room in your house, you're really gonna, but
So if we did, let's say, start to get close to any cap, this says that an LCP amendment is required. Is that really the only way to change this, or could we do it? Well, for example, what I'm trying to think of is for the STR cap, we don't have to change. Do we have to change to the LCP for that too? Oh, okay. Oof. I think we leave it as a cap and deal with it in 20 years.
continuing along the theme of leaving a cap in place, I did just have a comment on the cap shall be reevaluated if and when. And just kind of a commentary on that, what's the time frame, within what time frame of reaching these metrics will this be revisited? Are there any circumstances that would trigger reduction in ADU, JADU capacity? We would also want to put in there now, the other direction, might we find something, or is it a percent of change? And, if we get within 80% of the cap, we need to, we trigger discussion or something about this just to make sure we're kind of not more behind the process than the process is going to put us just by going through the process.
Yeah, we could put a trigger in there. I think it's worded, one is worded, that could be a decrease in the city finds that it has less water than it thought it did. That could be a trigger under one as written. Or two, you could say, yeah, maybe it's if the city gets to 32 or whatever is that 80%, that would be fine. Let's reevaluate it.
And along that line, since you've written in there, one example of substantial change, such as addition, maybe also put in there, or significant, long-term sustained decrease in cities, kind of thing.
But does say any changes to the water system?
Oh, that's true. The water, you're right.
Substantially change
I didn't
the
read that,
amount of
no.
water availability, so that could be
It
up
does
or
go different
down.
directions. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Anything else on that section? Right. The limited ADU area, anything in there? 4.030 still at the bottom of page 18.
One thing I will note, on the permitting section is, so as part of the last iteration of the ordinance, we were working on provisions for administrative CDPs so that we could approve septic repairs associated or septic upgrades associated with ADUs more easily. Was one of the, but I think we've also talked about the desire to have administrative permits anyway for other things as well. I do need to talk to Coastal Commission staff about that. What they would consider appealable that's associated, because I think what they said at our last meeting is that an ADU and any associated improvements necessary for the ADU are not appealable. So that would include OWTS. But one thing, so the Trinidad's ordinance does not have a process for just CDPs. It's actually very lacking in that sense. It's design review or use permit, and that's your CDP. There's no process, and we've run into things where something requires a CDP but not a use permit or design review. So one thing, and I have drafted regulations for a whole new CDP chapter for our ordinance, and I'm thinking about, and this is a question for Coastal Commission staff, is whether we put that through at the same time as this ordinance. Administrative permits, the ministerial CDPs would probably go in that section as well, so it takes some of those things out of this ordinance and put them in. Just side there, and that would change. So right now, sometimes I refer to use permits instead for the process for a full CDP, and then it wouldn't have to be, it would just would have a process. Also clear.
Under A on back at page 19, just a question that says provided in B and B of this section. There's a note to figure whatever that should say. And
I read that to mean that you were looking at the next paragraph, B.
Yeah, I'm sure it's B. Probably B and C is probably what it.
so 19, folks.
I want to get one.
Yeah.
Under C, under one section C, you talk about removal or replacement of major structural components and placement or erection of any solid material or structure on land. What in the world? Who decides what a major structural component is? And that's solid material. I mean,
I think that's
any material we have is solid. We don't have air and water, included here, so.
So that language is from the Coastal Commission, and I think it's straight from the definition of development. But I think that's the language from.
Okay, so.
All relative to an arbitrary index.
So I'm fine with that if everybody else is. It's just, if somebody brings to this commission and says, we think there's a major structural component here, we say, you need to, now we have something significant. If there's no definition of what that is. You put in one wall, you know, in the existing structure, that could be.
They do,
Depending on
but-
the size.
So it's probably further refined in their requirements. Were there exceptions for repair and maintenance exemptions? It's like replacement of more than 50% of the structure. And it talks about actual walls and foundations. So it gets a little bit more detailed. I'm guessing that's where that would fall. So basically, if you're replacing more than 50% of the structure.
So maybe a reference to that's all written down.
I think the intent of this, I mean, is to show, to demonstrate that this paragraph is intended to show that you do not require a CDP unless those things are identified.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be in everybody's interest not to say that the major component needs to be replaced. I guess I'm not making myself very clear.
You might just use different language and take out this. Something that's,
I guess, Trevor, can you find out from Coastal Commission what they think that means and get back to us? And then once we have that, I mean, they may have their version of case law that has clearly delineated these are the examples, this is the kind of stuff that falls into that. We'll be like, oh, okay, great. All right, anything else on 19? Page 20.
I had two questions on D. The first question is, shall be on site during any ground disturbing activities. And I get a little confused because it's always been my understanding that even if you wanted to put a post in the ground, that was the ground disturbing activity. And so does that mean that if someone was doing that we would have to have cultural monitor?
I don't really like this. I would lean towards taking that out. Again, the Coastal Commission had something in there about ensuring cultural resources are protected. And each didn't like that because that's subjective. So this was my attempt to do something objective. And I do think this is where we're headed eventually for all projects, not just ADUs. But actually all these coastal resource protection standards are where we're headed for all development.
I guess my suggestion would be if we, instead of saying any ground disturbing activities, say something like any ground disturbing activities associated with the
Or
ADU.
requiring a
that.
grading
Yeah.
permit.
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, you may be right. If somebody scratches on the ground, with a shovel, does that require a cultural monitor? The other problem the other question I had in that same paragraph was the city's inadvertent discovery protocols. Do we have inadvertent discovery protocols?
We do.
Oh, okay, we do. Now that I think about it. Yeah, we do. Okay, right. Got it.
I had a question on this one. Is the use of just a limited ADU area kind of an attempt to carve out this scenario where there's more likely to be cultural resources based off the proximity to?
No, I mean, I would love to have a map, but I think, based on past conversations, I think the map might be the whole city.
Right.
So
I guess like kind of I don't have the answer, but why is it just the limited ADU area in this?
Oh, no. This is all, I think the limited ADU area is gonna pick up is gonna pick up most of these, you know, within 100 feet of, sensitive habitat, within 125 feet of the edge of, I think the limited 80-year area is gonna pick up most of these. But
any development that requires a new off-street parking spot, there's a significant area of ground disturbance.
yeah,
Whether it's gravel or whether it's a paved or just, turn from a lawn to a parking spot.
and I mean, and
Is that the intent?
And unfortunately, we just haven't been able to have that conversation with the tribes in terms of what they want. So at this point, I don't know what they want, so I was sort of erring on the side of caution. But again, like I said, I think I would remove that.
Yeah.
Unless the coastal commission says we have to.
Okay, why offer them the opportunity to let them say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't cover it.
Anything else on?
I mean, I would support removing that. Discussed. And then I had a comment on letter E. I would want to change it so new development shall not interfere with any public or prescriptive easement, not just such that are for bluff tops or shorelines. And I'm assuming that prescriptive easement. Yep. Prescriptive easement, public. I assume that's what the intention is there.
Yeah.
So, oh, really?
Well, I think.
I mean, I don't know, maybe that doesn't even need to be in there because those things are already protected.
You would think, again, it's something that coastal commission added. But you would think they would be protected, and it does seem like. I mean, that just seems like and it does seem like an objective standard, so the city should be able to limit that for all, regardless of whether it's a coastal issue.
But also defines two specific issue items, which is or the shoreline. So that might mean that you don't want to say any.
I can ask.
Yeah, it seems like it should be public or private, prescriptive or otherwise easement. You would hope that would get checked for any development, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I guess you put it in here as an additional check.
I mean, maybe that's something that should go in the general standards as opposed to coastal. This whole city's in the coastal zone, it doesn't.
I wanted to cover one other thing we've done this far. And that is this restriction on these within 100 feet of the unstable land designated on plate 3. Plate 3 already has a big conservative setback built in. So we're adding another 100 feet.
I have, and I have never seen another jurisdiction that is more than 100 feet of bluff setback. But for some reason, Trinidad is 125.
Well, I understand the bluff, but a lot of these are unstable areas are not the bluffs.
No, you're right. Because there is an existing general plan policy that says development, roads, septic systems won't be allowed in unstable areas or within 100 feet of areas mapped. So we already have, so it's not in the zoning regulations, and I have never implemented that for development because it's not in the zoning regulations, but it is a general plan policy that says any development within 100 feet of these mapped areas will have a.
So now many of these residences that are within this 100-foot area aren't the least bit concerned about their own stability. Either gonna not be able to have the DBU.
They can
or they have the deed restriction, but
They can, well, they can be within that area, but they have to go through the standard CDP process.
which means an evaluation of if it is actually an unstable. Because right, that's true.
Yeah.
There's an exception to the 100.
Yes,
They can get around that.
yes.
else on 20?
Yeah, just for explanation, G, that first sentence reads, ADU and JDU granted pursuant to subsection H. Where is subsection H?
Oh, I just didn't update that, I see where it's.
Yeah, I was just trying to tie it to something. Somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting on.
One more little
Yep.
comment. The deed restriction, I understand what that's all about, and they say approved by the city. Is there a particular person or entity? Is it a council? Is it this commission? City manager?
We could say a city attorney, that's usually, yeah, I mean, that's usually who we run these things by.
Yeah, like that.
Which brings up another interesting question that I forgot about earlier. Have we run this by the city attorney or is it too early in the development?
Not this version.
But we will.
I think we're early for that.
I
Think reminding us of the third entity this needs to go through the.
can't wait for that revision.
Blame it on them.
All right, back at page 21.
Sorry, I just, before you go on, I've been pondering D a bit more, and I wouldn't mind leaving it included, but I would also grant the tribal entities the right to waive, the obligation to having a cultural monitor, since, they have the best available information about where the most sensitive sites are. They may dictate when and when not the cultural.
They're torn.
I guess well, and this would be. And so one limit is that the city by state law is required to issue these permits in 60 days. So that kind of limits notification and response time. Cases. Make it enough time. But someone could get around that by going through the full standard. Just to.
Would that though introduce what you're suggesting, introduce some subjectivity into this then too, and take it out of the hands of the city and put it. If we're supposed to be designing an objective process, I don't know how to solve it. That just popped into my head when you said that.
in administrative approvals, nobody's getting notified.
We have to notify, even for these ministerial permits that aren't even appealable, we have to send out a bunch of notices.
Okay, so.
So I guess someone could appeal and say it's not consistent with these standards.
Yeah, I think it violates the ministerial rules for X reason. Right?
However, I don't recall that the people, the notifications included the tribes.
It does mention just the
No, it
geographic
does,
distance.
no, it doesn't. I mean, that's sort of our standard practice, but it is not.
Could there also be a scenario where, say, we do notice that the tribes, and there's get no response from the tribes?
So
It seems actually pretty likely.
that seems
And
very
then you're
likely.
stuck
So-
having to have monitor.
Well, but you could word it and say. So a lot of times with letters like that where we wouldn't expect a response, we would say, if we don't hear from you, we assume you approve.
Kind of like later on, it says if the city doesn't respond within 15 days, then it's approved, right? So kind of put a,
But this states you have to have the monitor.
Yeah.
right. Now, if we word it differently, like you're suggesting, put some kind of a,
Right. Like you get 10 days, yeah.
So we could say, we could have that requirement
Yeah.
if requested by a tribe.
Yeah.
I don't know how HCD would. But it's a coastal act issue, so coastal act requires protection.
something else for your next discussion with the coastal commission is if we worded something like that where, noticed by a certain, noticed. And then if no response, then the assumption is that there's no concern, the applicant can proceed. It's, fair to offer the notice to protect the resources is important, but it's also equally important that the applicant be able to move on in a reasonable time fashion and not get held up by factors outside of their control. They're trying to do everything right.
That's how that typically works.
Yeah. I'm gonna try it again. Anything else on page 20? All right, how about 21?
So at the top, there's 3 and 4. So you build your ADU and forgo your rights for shoreline armoring, et cetera. Is that only armoring pertinent to your ADU, or what about the existing primary residence?
I would assume it's just the AD.
I would hope so. Yeah.
I would hope so, but it sort of is. I mean, number 3 is pretty much like, yeah, you're done with rights.
Sure, the coastal commission would love to slip that in there.
Well, that's part of our other policies and ordinances anyway,
Retreat.
right?
Not, we do not have good standards for armory and. That's right or not a right. So that's again, it's these, I think these coastal resource protection standards are going to apply to all CDPs once we get that in our ordinance.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the armoring thing. That we went over that earlier last year, but. Isn't that you only sort of forgo your rights to armoring for new development, not necessarily an existing development? It's already there.
Well,
Even in our new hazard plan.
I think. From what I know, the exact date hasn't been down, although it depends on who you ask, I think. But in general, it's when the Coastal Act went into effect is existing. But that, I mean, there are still people litigating that says anything that's existing.
I mean, the ADU is already being restricted in these unstable and in areas, you know, into the coastal bluffs. There's no armory anywhere else.
No, and they should, and they're supposed to, you know, if it's new development, you're supposed to have a geologic report that says it's safe for the design life of the project anyway. But I think we could say that they have no right under the Coastal Act, related LCP policies, shoreline armoring to protect the J.
Where would that apply though to something that's going into an existing structure? It does have protections, existing accessory. Existing. Right? I mean,
So
putting an ADU into my existing,
these don't apply, if the J/ADU is contained entirely within a legally authorized existing or improved residential structure that will not be repaired to the extent that it constitutes a replacement structure, blah, 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 blah.
okay. Okay.
And that applies to all the improvements too.
Please write from that. Okay. All right. I had a comment on the item 2 for the public health and safety requirements. The not requiring a sprinkler for new construction. I have a huge problem with that. Just globally, new construction, in my opinion, should have residential sprinklers added to it. It's a life safety issue. It's designed for getting people out of a building. And with the delay it takes up here for suppression and rescue resources to arrive on scene, this is a life and death difference. Fire sprinklers save lives. It's unequivocally shown. And yes, I'm biased because of what I do for a living and what I get to see them do and see people walk out of buildings now that didn't used to walk out of buildings, right? So, you know, I have a very impassioned perspective on this, and new construction is the absolute most ideal time to do it because the incremental cost per square foot is nominal. It's more work for a plumber, you know, yes, it's plan checks, those types of things, but I mean, I want to say, I think the average new home, single family home is about a $6,000 to $8,000 increase. Last I heard, my numbers could be off, but it's not a huge cost in the scale of a huge project, right? So I just think we're missing an opportunity here to increase the safety, and our fire response is not robust in a rural county like Humboldt County. And so I think it's, in my opinion, irresponsible not to require that, even if it's not in the main structure. And from a water demand standpoint, because somebody could go, well, then it's going to, you know, the water, you got a fire using a lot of water to suppress the fire. And these are designed to keep the fire in check and allow for egress, not to extinguish it. That's what residential sprinklers do. They just buy you time to get out of your house. So I think, I don't care for that language law as written.
I think the state code prohibits the city from this.
Clarify that, please.
I would verify. And maybe we can apply it to new construction versus
We should probably check it because I thought new construction statewide required, like a new building being built requires it, right?
I will look into that because I know this language is in here, but I don't know how HCD applies to that.
Aaron, do you carry that thought onto the part where it would be installed, required to be installed in the existing primary dwelling?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, is it a good idea? Absolutely. Would I recommend it if you have the means? You bet, every time. But that's an arduous, that's a limiting.
Yeah, that's more expensive than
Yeah,
putting it existing.
Yeah, it's a retrofit. Yeah, but new construction, it's incremental. The cost is not significant. From my understanding, so. That's all I have on that, sorry. Off the soapbox. Anything else on 21?
You know, just to add on to that, if you don't require something like that, then we go on to the very next section, and we talk about requiring solar panels. I mean, there is a
Now that,
consistency here. You're forcing construction that the existing resident doesn't necessarily have. So,
that I did not see in the state code, and so I'm not sure where it came from.
I thought it was now a requirement for new construction to have solar.
It's a requirement in the California Building Code if the city has adopted that. I think the city uses it, but I don't know if the city's officially adopted it. So yeah, so new construction would require solar panels under the current building. So it's, I don't think, and the same, there's a requirement in here for new construction. It used to be accessible. Accessible, and I didn't see that in the state code.
if it's a newly constructed, it requires solar panels. Then it just added sentence in there, they require fire sprinklers too.
If we can, because I don't think that's not in the state ADU law. I think number 2 is.
I would be fine with striking number 3 if we can. I think there's ways around having the solar panels on your house. Your house isn't shade all the time, but get it, do a study that it's just an added cost. And there's just not much. Get much from PG&E from having solar panels.
Well, okay, so then we have to consider the county rules also when it comes to CPAC. Climate Action Plan, which includes a bunch of stuff. So RCEA gets involved in that, and there's a bunch of county level requirements to meet certain energy levels and pollution levels, and so we have to kind of look at that too. And I don't know if taking an exception for solar panels would necessarily trigger an alarm, but I think it might, I don't know.
I think, if we remove it, then it's just dictated by the building code. By the building code. So it's probably not necessary. And I think, you could also bringing up the RCAP, that's a good point. Electrification is a goal of that. So, but I think HCD would disapprove. HCD disapproves of like standards that are specific to AU. So we could require electrification of all new development, but HCD would not approve it if it's just AU.
What's the California Energy Code? I mean, is our answer right here staring us?
Maybe I could talk to.
Right, shall comply with the California Energy Code requirement. I mean, right there be telling us that, or I don't know, are we beholden to that? So I guess maybe on 2 and 3, Trevor, if you can research, we can and can't do with those. If we can have more discussion, right? And just on kind of it's number 3, but it leads on to the next page. We've had this general discussion before about unless determined to be infeasible, the overhead and undergrounding. And again, I'll just raise the point that has been raised before. Very broad definition. Who makes that determination? What is the standard for what is feasible and what is not?
I mean, so yeah, that's a good question. And HCD objected to that term in the last iteration. So I guess one question for you would be do you just want to require underground lines? but that can be prohibitively expensive depending on the case. And to me, feasible is actually pretty well defined in SEPA cases.
Yeah.
So, it's capable of being accomplished in a timely manner, I forget all the criteria, but, economically, socially, technologically, it's reasonably capable of being accomplished. To me, that is not subjective because I think it is pretty well defined, but I don't know how HC feels about that. So that is a good question for you guys to weigh in on, if you want to just remove the requirement altogether for undergrounding. Or
I don't. I mean, the city has invested a tremendous amount to underground utilities in 80% already and is actively to agree pursuing undergrounding the rest of town. So I think to not have that a requirement is, going to look strange to have an underground line to the property line and then
should we just take out less determined than feasible, just say it has to be underground?
Yeah.
Certain situations that it might be.
Yeah.
But does that then make it okay to have overhead lines?
Well, it's just a line running from the house to the ADU, I guess it wouldn't be.
I mean, like Trevor said, feasible is a defined term.
Yeah, that's where the attorney comes
Fall
in.
back.
He's going to tell us. Yeah, I think feasible is sufficient. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, personally,
But there could be a scenario where.
and someone would have to make a case for that.
I mean, I guess someone could apply for a standard permit
Well,
and
that's
get
what I
around
was
it.
just about to suggest. Is there a different way that they could go about that? Well, if they can't underground it, then they have to go through the full process, which will make that discussion happen, or is
That's
that?
a good, so I don't think exceptions are allowed for the public health and safety standards. But we could move that somewhere.
So transition to OWTS shouldn't take long.
Almost halfway through.
Just a generic question. Does the OWTS have to be in here? Within the AD ordinance, or could it live independently within the OWTS ordinance? And then we just know that, of course, there's going to be OWS work. It's covered by that. Do we want to create a system where we've got rules and details? I mean, I'm not saying we don't need to specify for ADU and JDU, but is this the right place to do it?
I think. I think except for maybe number 3, yes, so essentially. Number 1 is in the state ADU code. So that is definitely allowable for ADUs. Now, should we apply that to all development? I guess that's the question. Do we modify the WTS ordinance to apply that? Development?
Which part of the?
Number 1 under B.
Yeah, but I mean, which part are you saying to apply for all development? The whole paragraph?
I mean, you already, for all development, you have to submit proof that your OWTS is adequate. The one thing we don't require is a new permit.
Well, those may be required.
And it says may be required at discretion. And again, that's straight from the state code.
And does that code have to appear in our AD ordinance, or could we have it appear?
WTS ordinance.
I guess I'm just, I'm new to town, I want to build an ADU, I go, and I know it's got wastewater, so I look at the wastewater thing, and I just, how many places do I have to look to get an answer for OWS? Now we're at 2. If it, it's from a keeping track standpoint of it.
Yeah, Well, I mean, we could have everything in the ordinance. Does that make it easier?
Well, on the other hand, if somebody is looking at an ADU and they go straight to the ordinance, this puts them on notice that one of their constraints is making sure that on-site wastewater system is adequate. That's redundant to the other ordinances, but then there's,
But just a reference to it then, OWTS, section B, OWTS, please refer to the OWTS ordinance.
that would do it.
Oh yeah, there is something you have to think about, but we're only going to write it down in one spot for you to have to check, one spot for us to keep track, and one spot for us to update, and one spot for us to, get through the coastal commission. It's where we get one thing through and then we have a second section in a different ordinance about that same topic. And then wait a minute, now we've got set ourselves up to where our two ordinances don't agree with each other because we've got the same requirement at two different spots and something changed between the initial approval and second.
Yeah, and that would be something to discuss with coastal commission staff too, because they might want to see this in this certified ordinance or OWTS ordinance is not. They might want these protected. I think,
So only if they want that here. You need to put these details. That's the thing.
yeah, I mean. And it might be something to also talk to DEH about. Unfortunately, they're in the process of updating regulations.
If you find out where they're heading with it, with their regulations.
Yeah, and are the county's ADU requirements in the code, in the zoning and land use code, or are they in the zoning regulations? I'm not sure.
Yeah, their system pretty well goes down. Staff and everything else.
Yeah, but again, like they did, change an interpretation that they I wonder if thinking about 4 might be good in this ordinance, just because the regulations do allow exceptions to setbacks if you get an ADU of a certain size. So you can have setbacks unless it would preclude an ADU to at least 800 square feet. So, but we don't I think we should still protect the reserve area.
Isn't that protected though elsewhere? Reserve area under the OWS ordinance, that you get any new building and CDPs and applications, isn't that one of the metrics that they're evaluated by?
Yeah. It is addressed in the DEH regulations. Okay.
I don't know, just as I read this section, nothing jumped out at me that it was unique to this, other than that it was mentioned here and had JADU. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we could say something, we could just say that adequate sewage capacity must be available and but they have to submit proof that the health officer and OWTS administrator approved it. And maybe that's all you have to say, and everything else is.
P4 is likely to be pretty limiting, though, right? By encroaching on reserve areas seems to be what would prevent ADUs from being built on most parcels of town. So it does seem relevant to, alert the public to that here. Yeah, I agree. It is a bit redundant with other policy.
A question on C, is that language we have to have in there, right? specifically the tiny house on wheel idea. I know that could be an attractive way. You know, is the state limiting that these have to be on a permit foundation? If somebody is able to create a pad that has all the attachments and everything and is able to provide affordable housing, an ADU unit, is it the right intent to say no? You know,
So, because HCD does not consider those things housing. The tiny homes, at least tiny homes on wheels, park model units. Hobbies. And I think this is I think this is in the state.
it's on 22.
I guess I understand it's so complicated that. Nope, no, I'll leave the way it is.
Page 23.
I think that's also from the state. I think that language is from the state.
Uh, page 23 at the bottom. Getting to see page setbacks. It's a B, really. That it must meet standards for front setbacks. Some standards of the underlying zone, but then goes and dictate some setback requirements that seem to have no zoning implications.
That's correct. So.
I guess B reads to me that all those things that are listed are pertaining to the zone, not just the minimum lot size.
Yeah.
Let's make it into 2 sentences.
Yeah, I think we should take front setbacks out of.
While we're talking about setbacks, just in general, was there not language under the ADU law previously that said that you could have 0 lot line construction if that was the only location on the property?
And that's what this no setback show, wait, oh, within.
I didn't read that.
Oh, that's where it, okay. That's where. Yeah, 0. If it would preclude construction of an ADU at least on 800 square feet, then yeah, you don't.
Those setbacks just don't exist at all, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to do with the. Front setbacks. I'll have to look. I think you can require, I think it's the front setback. But you can still require 4-foot setbacks because I think that's a fire code safety. To have building separation on the property. But
Only
you
on the
can't
front, though?
require a front setback if it would construction of it. Which is why I had that in B.
And then how would that fit in then adjacent to a legal non-conforming structure with no setbacks
You can have,
on an adjacent parcel?
because it's existing, so you can put one in an existing structure. Doesn't have sense. Even if it's just a garage.
Right.
I didn't say all the regulations make sense.
Now that you have, this just got easier.
So you think B should be 2 sentences, though? I could say the standards have to be met. And then another sentence that says exceptions will be granted if it would preclude construction of.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, break the two dots out, that this reads better.
If I'm hearing that one right now, or reading that one right, make me really drive home the point with if no other location on the property can be developed, that's the only time that would be allowed. I think that's a really critical thing to, it's not that you don't want to put it over on the,
Yeah.
western edge of your property. It's like you can't, there's literally no other place, not just doesn't work aesthetically for you. You know what I mean? That's clear, folks.
I think we could get rid of E2. D2, because Trinidad does not have, nor will ever have a major transit. Testified.
Except that I bet that 101 is considered a high quality transit corridor, isn't it?
It's really, even HCD's letter said that does not, it does. It's very, very specific.
Bus stop doesn't count.
Like, but it has to be like buses every 15 minutes or something.
We're a few years off from that, I think. Do you have any understanding why we're talking about that in relation to building height? What the correlation there is? Because that was my big question. I just do not understand the walkability of an ADU impacting the height of the product there. And I,
You know, one of the things the state keeps doing is they want apartments near transit stops. And so they've been removing height limits altogether, which has been a big fight with cities.
Okay.
I don't know how it leads into ADUs really.
multifamily ADU, perhaps, the new category.
Can't imagine a 10-story building with individual apartments and every one of them putting an ADU in.
I just didn't see the nexus to transit and heights.
With one single family residence, you can have a JADU, an attached ADU, and a detached ADU.
So to,
So
yes. Understand very right here. What page are we on? 23, 4, yeah, 10, 11. Tristan, did that answer your, what you had at the end of what you kind of brought up?
Oh,
And then we all kind of jumped on that.
yeah, I mean, I guess so. Well, maybe not, because if we are stuck with these setbacks that are defined in C, then why are we even bothering to mention them?
I did that. You're right about the underlying zone and it doesn't apply. I did that because I was trying to combine this exception for at least 800 square feet because front setbacks are that exception
Okay.
too.
So
But
maybe just,
it's not written well.
it just needs to be written so the underlying zone really only pertains to the minimum lot size standards and not the rest of the set. I guess those other things are.
Well, we don't have right now, we don't have lot coverage. There are some open space requirements in the P zone. But But in our zones, we don't have lot coverage or floor area ratio, but I think we will.
Yeah, I guess just teasing apart the zoning qualifiers, right, the non-zones.
We're drifting on page 24.
This, we're on page 24, we're on
24, we're officially on 24.
Get together.
We run officially on 24.
So under 3B, I know that we've talked about this before, but it's so arbitrary to locate an ADU within an architecture historically significant historic district. I don't know how to deal with that.
So that is straight from the state code and it would have to be designated by the city.
But then maybe that's the thing to say is as designated by the city. That way, that kind of helps me say that Trinidad is okay.
Are there any architecturally or historically significant districts in Trinidad?
Not currently designated, but the city could choose to designate.
Yeah.
I'm saying in case they did.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
But in number A there too, the ADUs located within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit. We do have a bus stop. It's not, so this applies. So if this ADU is within a 1/2 mile of the bus stop,
Walking distance, not as the purpose.
well, okay.
All that means then is that no additional parking is required.
That's what we mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
So having said that,
But if you're more than a 1/2 mile, you do require it.
so the same question then under F. All newly constructed first floor ADUs shall be adaptable. What does that mean?
So, and again, that is not something in the state code. I'm not sure where it came from, and I was gonna ask how you guys feel about it. Maybe it's a building code thing.
That's a building.
Well, I understand ADA compliant.
So basically, it's gonna be, like doorway widths and things
Yeah,
like
but-
that.
But see, in my mind, there's a distinction. ADA compliant is just what you're referring to. Certain things have to be like,
So it doesn't have to be compliant because you don't have to put in the bars and the ramps and the special fixtures and things
okay.
like that. But it has to have the width so that you could add it.
The blocking behind, it has to be capable of being made compliant
Yes.
behind the scenes. That way it's just, okay.
Aging in place.
Yeah.
okay, I got that.
I wanted to clarify B4. Back to the height limits real quick. I just want to make sure I understand that there's a height limit of 25 feet for an ADU attached to the primary dwelling. That can be new construction, right? Even if the dwelling is 16 feet. And our hands are tied? Okay,
That was one, that is one, I think, one of
so the little bungalow in town, the Fisherman's Cottage, they can attach an ADU to their,
They could put a second story or attach it, yeah.
okay,
And I think, again, that is one of the, I think that law changed like I think that changed 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and I mean, that was really a killer for Trinidad.
Okay, but this section is for standards for accessory dwelling units outside of the limited ADU area.
So now we've eliminated that view area,
Right.
so you can do that, anywhere else.
But not in the view area, so.
but where I struggle with that is that if somebody were to come to modify their dwelling or build a dwelling, then we would be able to have conversations and design review and limitations on that, because it's an ADU, we cannot.
Yes, that is, yeah, right.
It's just, if it's a mandated double standard.
Yeah,
I don't like
it's
it,
just
but it
the,
is.
the chances of having a view issue outside of the limited
Yes.
ADU area are less prone to those kinds of issues,
Less prone, but not non-existent.
but not non-existent things.
And where I struggle with that, I mean, again, this is very theoretical, this I don't know if this ever really happened, but then you begin to change the character
Yes,
of the community,
Yeah.
right?
right, oh,
Except in the area that has the view protection.
right,
The rest of town, free for all. If you've got a public view, the character of town is going to be extra protected there than the rest of town. But I understand it's mandated. We have no capacity to restrict that.
You could consider certain designations, like a highly scenic designation for Trinidad, or you could do a historic resource study and designate this area as historic. So you could, there are ways, those are your ways around it.
I think people are going to be building really tall ADUs, probably not.
Probably not, but that's it, to get around the set, like to have room for your septic, you have to go up. So I think, this area of town is probably most susceptible to that. One of the things that really bothered me and one of the things that finally was sort of the last straw for me of giving up on the old ordinance is that we did allow, I don't know if we went to 20, I forget what our height limits were in the last version of the ordinance, but what we said was, okay, you can do that, but you have to record a deed restriction that says you're actually going to use that as an ADU. Otherwise, it's a loophole for someone just adding on to their house that doesn't intend to have an ADU. Actually, said, no, you cannot require a deed restriction.
Okie dokie.
Intended consequence.
3C, a question. Should it read an existing accessory structure as well? It specifies existing primary. Should that also be an existing accessory, or is that? Or is that any accessory structure?
It exists.
Okay. Because would a new accessory structure be exempt from the parking?
Yeah. Because there is language about, like, if you remove a garage or something to build an ADU, you don't have to replace those spots.
Yeah.
I will look at that. I think this language is straight from the code, but that doesn't mean it can't.
So 24. 5.
It's a long time since we've had these discussions, but I just wanted to confirm that as far as G goes, that's what we ultimately decided. That topic came up during a joint meeting with the council.
Oh.
STR committee meeting.
Oh,
Sorry,
Yeah, well,
the upper
oh.
G, as far as ADUs, shall not be rented for periods of less than.
this G, okay, yes, no, okay, so, that is a good question. So I think, so. For these ADUs. Under this section. The city can decide whether or not to allow ADUs to be. Now, I think the planning commission. Put it somewhat differently from the city council, but that doesn't necessarily mean this can't be. For the next section, H, that is a new addition to the state code, I think this year, last year. The JAU, so previously, the state did not limit rental of JADUs. But now that's in the state code. And for the exempt one, so the next section in the state code, those are limited. They can't be STRs. They have to be more than 30-day rentals. But for this one, these ADUs, section 175408, the planning commission does have a choice on whether they can be STRs.
I'm saying this is up for debate.
We have had this discussion in the past and kind of made a decision, but you know, now the regulations are a little bit different, so you know, it's before you again. Yes, you have a choice on this.
My question was, I mean, honestly, I forgot how I felt about that, but does this reflect what our consensus was at the time? Accurately?
I'll have to look. I did look at that recently. I wanna say the planning commission left a little bit more leeway for STRs, and the city council, I think, basically said no STRs. In either ADUs or the apartments, which,
That's right, because then we started talking about the home share STRs, right?
yeah. So, and now a JADU cannot be, under the state code, can't be. Now, can you
But you
go
can
get
go
a
into
standard permit? Can you go get a standard permit and have an STR?
You move into
I think-
your,
I thought we decided that was sort of the thought, was
Yeah.
like, oh, if you want to build one as,
Then you have to
Then
come
you
for
go
the use
to the
permit.
you can move into your JADU and then turn your primary residence into an STR.
Under the state code, yes.
yeah,
Wonder if we tangled.
yeah. I thought we, on this body, decided that, well, maybe decided, but we're inclined to lean on the STR ordinance to sort of govern STRs in the city.
Yes. But that kind of, yeah, that sounds familiar. That kind of would, regardless of what
Yeah,
nuance we decided here at the end of the day, the overall number of STRs would still,
right,
stay in balance.
adjacency requirements and all of that. stuff.
right, all those things would still be there.
Right.
And to me, especially, I mean, if someone is a owner occupant, it makes housing more affordable.
Sure. Totally.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the, yeah.
Yeah, I guess my comment was just to ensure that
It's,
consistent with
well,
what.
I think you can have that discussion again.
Based on what we sort of just thought, I guess we should slash G, right? Yeah, take it out.
I'm too new to this, so I don't have.
I would say let's not slash it yet unless let's go back and look at minutes and stuff and see. That's
We are change our mind today too. But yeah, let's see what we said last time.
or if we said let's let the STR ordinance govern this, let's make sure that the ordinances. Maybe that's we intended.
Right. But it would just, I don't know that the ordinance was written. I think it would just, we felt it would kind of naturally address the concerns
With a cap.
with a cap.
It's always-
You know, if I build an ADU and then want to turn it into STR and get a license, then that means somebody else couldn't turn what could be an ADU. So they're on the options under the attorney. So you're not really eliminating the opportunity for an ADU. You're just transferring from one parcel to the other, I think is how I believe I felt at that point in time.
Wasn't there some other nuance like JADUs didn't require STR permits or something like this?
They do, well, Rooming and boarding,
There's no cap though, because they would be a home share STR, right?
Right.
yeah, no, we took that out of the home occupation. So yeah, so there's a home share STR license where you rent out over in bedroom in your home. Like the original Airbnb.
You know, having to be on site for that work. All right, so page 25.
Number one at the top, the provision of sale of JDU, does that come from the state code?
Wait, are we, oh,
Oh, sorry, I'm on 26. Never mind. 25.
Trying to make sense of my notes. I have 5 things here.
on JCUs on 25.
1754-090 development standards specific to JADUs. Just clarifying under A, where it says the JADU shall be constructed with the walls were proposed or existing legally authorized single-family dwelling that is not part of a duplex or multifamily. So my question there, and I think maybe we answered this earlier tonight, if it's located within an accessory unit, it could still be an ADU or a JADU in an accessory unit, or does a JADU by definition have to be within the actual physical primary residence?
No, well, I think you have some flexibility to determine or define that, but the way it's currently written is if it is already permitted living space of the residence, it could be a JA. You would have to get that permit to make it living space.
And in section B, the 500 square foot limitation of a JADU. What if I have an 800 square foot master suite that I want to convert to a JADU inside my existing structure? I'm not allowed to, or I have to put up a wall to limit it to 500 feet?
Call it an ADU.
Okay.
Have a attached ADU.
Then with D, the separate entrance provided to serve the JADU only. Is that required? So you can't have a common mudroom corridor that has one door that goes off to the main structure where you live and then also accesses a stairwell or another, you know.
I think you could have one common entrance that then has 2 entrances. Is that what you're saying?
That's my question, because it says shall be provided to serve the JADU only. The way I read that is that I have to have a separate, distinct JADU only access point.
Is how that.
Which would really limit every single opportunity for JADU just disappears under that unless you build an external stairwell. Or put a, you know, into a door, right?
Unless we interpret, now, these might be straight from the state code, but we can interpret them and we can say, well, exterior is still, like if you have a breezeway, hallway kind of thing, that's still exterior. But that's a good
I mean,
question.
you know, as I'm reading through this, you know, I have no intent for this, but it's just the natural thing for me to compare things to is my own structure that I'm intimately familiar with, right? And so I have my main entrance to the front of my house. Then in the breezeway between my house and my garage, I have a side entrance that goes into a laundry room that has a stairwell up to what theoretically could be a JADU, but also has a doorway into my main house. And that's an entrance that could be used by both. And this would not allow me to do that the way I interpret this and read it.
Then you call it an ADU.
So an ADU doesn't need a separate entrance, but a JADU does.
I don't even know why, I do not understand. All, this could just be an ADU. I don't, the state.
Okay,
Like, why even bother defining JADs?
right. I'm losing that thread exactly tonight. I don't understand the difference anymore, really.
10, 20
You were
years
ahead of
ago,
that.
it wasn't like this, and now they just blended so much that,
I guess, can you find out if that is?
yeah. That. And it's funny, like for E, so in our last, so this is straight from the state code and efficiency kitchen, but efficiency kitchen is not defined.
Right.
And we defined an efficiency kitchen to basically be a wet bar to limit a JAD, which makes a lot of sense. And the state said, no, we can't do that. It basically is a kitchen. I'm like, well, why did the state call it an efficiency kitchen?
Right.
There's gotta be a difference. And I thought, and it was objective standards, but now you can't.
Anything else on 25?
That's another one.
26?
I had a question about. the sale.
Yeah, the sale, J, is that direct from Seika? Okay. All right, that's.
And then I had a question, C, the very last section.
26,
On 26, I'm trying to understand what that paragraph is trying to say. The way I read it a couple times and where my mind is currently is that it reads that an ADU, JDU could be located within the storage room, boiler room, et cetera.
Yes. Or at least include that space. I don't think someone's gonna actually. Like maybe just a boiler room, but. And it, you know, this is the kind, it's this, I don't think.
Um. So for a lot of, for some amount of parcels in town, we've required as part of whatever project their people are proposing, required to file a deed restriction. How does that? Is the, and those deed restrictions say you can't have more than however many bedrooms on your
And
parcel.
units now,
or
yeah.
units. And then how will this square with that? Is that those deed restrictions are like null? Or
No, you can file, I mean, you could file a new, forget, we have done it before. I forget if it was just a new deed restriction that then because it's newer, it supersedes the old one. Or if it was actually called something else, but you can, then you record a new one that has the new requirement. Yeah, I mean, and one thing, I mean, I sometimes think about whether we still need the deed restriction requirement, considering we have yes permits that should cover that. But again, there's a lot of people that still say they have a second unit and they don't. Don't know that the deed restriction is a
don't need to get it.
real protection.
Anything else on 26?
Yeah, A3, the rear and side setbacks sufficient for fire and safety. Is that defined? Or that's just something?
Now, maybe we could define it. I don't know, but I mean. I tried to define efficiency kitchen, they wouldn't let me do that.
All right.
I don't know.
Fire and safety. Very good wording there too.
And now this is this weird exempt subset of ADUs. Again, that I just find the whole thing so convoluted, but. So for a city who doesn't have an ordinance, you still have to allow all of these, but even if you have an ordinance, you still have to allow. I mean, it's just, anyway. And the language is from the code, and I guess we would have to interpret that as they come in.
Anything else on 26? Anybody? All right, 27. Just for the record, under E, I'll note the same objection about fire sprinklers.
In paragraph D at the top. It's the third line down. But a detached from multifamily, second and third line. Detached from multifamily dwelling in rear and side yard setbacks no more than 4 feet, or is it no less than 4? Should read no less than 4.
Two. I think, yeah, that is, I'm sure that's straight from the code, and I think what it means is the city can't require more than 4 foot setback. But it's written,
Or these are just things, these are exemptions from 1754-080. Right, this whole section,
kind of, yeah,
if they hit, if they meet any of these criteria, then they don't have to comply. So if it has this, that setback restriction, then it's not held to anything in the standard for ADU outside of the limited ADU, right?
yes. Sometimes I think I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. And then I.
It's not independent, you know what I mean? It's,
No, it just.
anything else on, is that 27, right? Yeah. Do you know, Trevor, why they have protection for carports versus uncovered spaces? Why simply putting a roof over parking spaces? F2 specifically? Just, you know, if the parking spaces are covered with a carport, they don't have to be replaced, but if they're out in the open. So if you build a carport over it before you do it, then you don't have to replace it. Well, you know, okay, all right, this. Yeah,
Those are things I've wondered myself.
okay.
Expense down, I guess, you know, encourage more ADUs. Don't make them build carport.
I mean, I think the idea is that we.
No, so you don't have to rebuild the carport, you just have to create new parking spaces if it was. Right, but if the spaces were existing without a carport. I say 2 spaces just in your driveway. You don't have to replace them, but I put a carport over my driveway, then it just, I think this isn't.
Maybe could you assume the structures meet setbacks and the parking in the driveway doesn't, or something? I don't know, so maybe that was the original reasoning.
Is this also subject to the half mile from the transit stop?
No,
Okay,
these off-street parking standards are from I think our old ordinance, so they're from old state code, so I don't think they meet the current state code. But it's what we had in our previous version, so.
27. 8.
So just to that, so I mean, you could say, because we're in our limited ADU area and you are putting a box around that doesn't conform with state code, you could require covered parking to be replaced if you want.
What do we want?
Just that the parking spaces get replaced, doesn't have to be covered. They just have to, if they take away parking, they have to put it back in the limited area where we've already identified parking as being at a premium. Is that what you're saying, Trevor?
Yeah, so so the required parking for the ADU,
Right, because part of what gains you admission to the limited ADU area could be limited on-site parking or no, limited off-street. parking.
yeah, so the idea here is that you're gonna. So right now, our ordinance requires 2 parking spaces in addition to any garage spaces. So, so that's what this last sentence that leads on to 28 is still gonna preserve those 2 parking spaces for the primary dwelling. Plus you have to have at least 1 space for the. So that's essentially what this, and so,
But it doesn't preserve, right? The garage, carport, or covered parking structure is demolished in conjunction with the construction of ADU. Those parking spaces shall not.
so if it's a park, and those are your 2 spots,
For an easy, yeah.
yeah. I think we should probably require there to still be 2 spots for the primary.
Yeah, guys.
By 28 officially. 28. 9. Had a few questions about kind of the time limits that begin with item 3 at the top of page 29. So as I understand it, right, the applicant submits just the general process, the applicant submits their thing, the city has 15 days to say complete or incomplete. If it's incomplete, you need to give us these 6 things. So my question is relative to point 3 at the top of page 29. If I then resubmit and the city finds something else that's missing that they missed on the first pass, that's what said, city should have caught it? Okay. Making sure that that's.
That was my interpretation.
Okay. And then kind of a follow-up, just for, to Richard's point earlier, clarifying things under item 4. The last sentence, this subsequent submittal, when you resubmit, is subject to timelines and requirements specified in subparagraph A. Does a new 15-day tolling clock begin with that second submittal? If the city gives you your reply back on day 14, you only have 1 day to resubmit. I think we should maybe just clarify that.
Okay.
Anything else on 29? $30. Section 1754-140, the title there, and then it kind of flows really throughout the whole document. I think for clarity and ease of understanding, for me, if it said, ministerial ADU coastal development permits, and then throughout the entire document, wherever CDP is used, it says ADU-CDP or JADU-CDP. Just that way, it's really driving home the point that these are CDP specific to ADUs and JADUs.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I had to keep going back and kind of mentally doing that. Like, just did that in a document as a matter of routine.
Yeah. There's definitely not consistency in some of the naming, and I like that because, that was one of my questions for Coastal Commission staff is, because I don't think there are ministerial CDPs for anything other than, so.
Anything else on 30? I had a thought that kind of is 30 leading to 31 with the content of the notice where we're spelling out what is notice to people. I'd suggest maybe adding a 6th item that it's not an appealable action. Otherwise, why the hell are you giving me this notice? I want to protest. We're noticing you because we have to, but you can't protest. Let's be
I think you can appeal it. Just say that, well, you can appeal it. I mean, that's a good, I think you can appeal it to say staff made a mistake and it's not consistent with these regulations. But you can't appeal one that's consistent with these regulations because it might block your view or look in your window or something.
So maybe just something, appeals are based off procedural,
Very limited, yeah,
procedural issues. I don't know.
yeah, no, I think that's good.
That's on 31. I just had a question. Existing ADUs, do you have any sense for how many are existing, and will those count towards the cap if they come under compliance? And where do they, let's say on day one, there's 35 people, beating down the door with the applications, yet there's also some people that have existing ones.
Aren't well, currently we don't have any ADUs, right?
We have a number of non-conforming ADUs
Right.
and a number of illegal ADUs.
Right. But the non-conforming ones, well, that would be something that is that not something that may have been permitted under like a use permit though?
It predates the LCP. I think the city did have a zoning ordinance pre-LCP, but there's no way to know if someone got permits for that or building permits. We really don't. So we say pre-1980, it's non-conforming. Post-1980, it's clearly illegal because it's not allowed, at least in the union.
So any of the ones that are post 1980, they wouldn't have, they couldn't have applied for a use permit to build.
Not in the UR zone, in the SR zone, they could have.
See. I guess my understanding is all the non-conforming ones would not.
It's they're legal and existing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the illegal one should
But should
count.
they count towards the cap?
No, because they're not additional water use above what we've already accounted. And
Okay,
technically,
okay.
they're illegal if they were pre-19. or
Because the cap
2000.
is derived from the water concern. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So wouldn't it be assumed that if there's an illegal one and they want to make it legal, then that would take one off the cap?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. It's a good. I mean, this again is state code, so state code has, and this is very recent, you have to permit existing, even if they don't comply with any of this. I'm not sure how the coastal, I haven't gotten comments from coastal on this, but they should count towards the cap.
Is that 31 or 32? Three. Just under C, where it says all standards, the third line up from the bottom, would that read better, complies with all other standards contained in this chapter? Drink less coffee before we go through this next time. I think that's For the ADU ordinance, all, if there's any objections, I'll open it to public comment. Essentially, if anybody, there's nobody left in the room here, but anybody online have any comments on the are perusing through the ADU ordinance today? Raise your hand or feel free to, yes, I think I saw a hand and then just there. Maybe the screen's cut off. Sherry, is that you with your hand up? There we go. Go for it.
Good evening. Thank you. First of all, thank you, commissioners, for your due diligence in reading these deep ordinances. I really appreciate that. And I hope that the members of the city of Trinidad really recognize the work that you do. So I just want to say thank you very much. I know it's very complicated work. Lots of different things play into reading ordinances and developing ordinances for our city. I came tonight because I have an STR, and it's not nearly like the accessible dwelling units, but it's almost similar. One of the things that I noticed in the city of Trinidad is, and speaking to you, Aaron, I really want to thank you for the sprinkler system. I think that that's really important, but also important for the city is having fire hydrants. My insurance for the STR that I have, and I think if people apply for this accessibility dwelling unit and they find out that the homeowner has now this dwelling unit, they may be required to have additional insurance that is higher than just regular residents. So I have an STR and then a regular residential area right next in the same lot. My residential area isn't very much because I have a very small house, but my STR is 3 times as much. I just got notice that they are not going to renew it. I'm going to have to research it again for finding insurance that's required. I have to have $1 million coverage. It's required. So now I've got to go look for more insurance for my STR. And I just think we need to think about that. Is that going to be required for the ADU units? Is insurance going to be required? And if so, what is going to be the capacity, or what is going to be that amount of limit that's going to be these homeowners now have to report and get additional insurance? My point is here that I hope sometime in the short-term planning that we think about fire hydrants in our city. It's really, really important. And I want to thank Roland in West Haven Fire area that we live up in West Haven Mutual Water District and the West Haven Water District. They got fire hydrants with this new grant they got. My insurance up in West Haven for my home that I have up there went down significantly because of just having fire hydrants. Everywhere in California, fire is a problem, even in the city of Trinidad. Insurances will not cover our homes because we don't have fire hydrants. And I really think that we need to start looking that at sooner than later, so to protect our homes in Trinidad and the local area of having, fire security, making sure that we have everything we can to stop these fires. So that was my comment tonight, just to think about fire hydrants, think about the cost it is having for STRs and now ADUs, that it might prevent people to develop more housing for people who need housing if they can't afford the insurances. Thank you so much for letting me have my comment, and I appreciate again all your work.
Hey, Sherry, can I ask you a question? Did your insurance company specifically state that there was a distance to a hydrant that you needed to be? Because there's one down on the corner.
Where at? Okay, where at?
It's right on the corner opposite Diane's house. It's right there.
I will bring that to their attention because I just got notice like 2 days ago.
Yeah,
and
let them know. And I think the next closest one might be on the edge of Murphy's, if I recall.
I will go take pictures of them and send them to my insurance company. Thank you so much.
Let them know there are fire hydrants in the city of Trinidad. They exist.
Great,
have-
thank you so much. I didn't pay attention to that. I just got this notice and I freaked out. You
Okay.
know, so I'm trying to figure that out. So, but it does affect insurances, and you know, fire is a big problem in the state of California and everywhere in the West Coast. So, just wanted to think about that a little bit and how we can prevent those type of emergencies if we can. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Anybody else does not appear to be? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission. Any other questions, Trevor? I mean, I know we've given you more than enough to work on for a year.
Since I vaguely remember our last discussion of this ordinance, wasn't there some text buried someplace that said effectively like none of this matters because there's no enforcement capability or something of that sort? Am I misremembering that? There was text somewhere that I recall that was something like, I swear this wasn't a fever
If
dream.
this ends up being true, could you not have brought that up about 2.5 hours ago? So we could have this.
Maybe it was a previous draft. I think it came from state law or something, but I remember being puzzled by it in the last discussion.
I don't recall that.
Not sure it was this ordinance. I
Take a rifle through my materials. This February 24th.
Up here to test people's memory.
No, I don't remember that either, except set for it.
All right, so I think with that, we're pretty done with agenda item number 1 for tonight. So the question is, it is almost 8:45, and I do just want to kind of take the temperature of the rest of the commissioners. You know, we've got teed up here a very important discussion on projects and priorities for the next year. Do we have it in us? Do we want to postpone this to the next meeting? How critical is it for you, Trevor, to get feedback on this tonight?
I don't think it's critical. I think it would be fine. And I don't have anything big for February meeting. I don't know if I'll have a new version of the ADU ordinance. There's homework I have to do there. I could probably have a revised noise element. But other than that, I don't have it.
I would suggest that if you did have that kind of document review to do, that it would be second on the agendas. So we could do this first.
Okay, yeah.
It is important, but we got a lot of year left.
Well, and I think it might, maybe it's better to actually think of it as fiscal year probably because setting the budget and stuff for the city.
Okay, anybody have anything burning they wanted to mention this tonight, or are we good to take a listen to the next meeting? Yeah. I make any public comments against us moving this to the next meeting or continuing it to the next meeting? Any opinions on that from the public?
I guess one question would be, do you want to recommend another joint meeting with city council?
Maybe on this subject, you're talking about just June.
So it's the planning commission, city council was having a joint meeting with the STR committee for a number of years. So we kind of got in that habit, and then they would sometimes talk about other issues. And then part of last year was that we had a new city manager, we had some new council members, planning commissioners, so that made it a little bit more important. I don't know if it's as pressing this year, but just thought I'd I think because the city council will be setting the budget, discussing the budget, and so there are, planning commission can have input on that without a joint meeting.
For me, candidly, the value added from the joint meetings, I've never really felt a great deal. The few that I've participated in, really, as far as having meaningful discussion that moves the needle on anything.
The last one certainly. Not wasting time, but it certainly wasn't eerie.
Yeah, they're almost could be covered in just a report out. I'd be happy to come up with something that the commission's happy with and present that to the council after we have our priorities. I do think your point about the budgetary stuff is important, but I think we've also, at that last meeting, I feel like it was the last meeting, we were very clear that we want you to have assistance, that you are maxed out and doing absolutely everything you can to advance all the projects, but we keep piling more projects on you. They keep becoming more complicated. As we get more grant funding, we're now beholden to the, so we're in this cycle where Trevor's just not enough, as amazing as you are. I know it's a harsh reality. So I don't know. That would be my suggestion. I just don't personally see a lot of value in trying to at that meeting. I don't think there's ever been a lot of robust discussion.
That's a nice compromise. You presented a report to them is what we're up to. Got questions?
Then I can bring it back to us.
Yeah.
We can discuss it and adjust. Just say that it's a pleasure of the council, of course, obviously, right? Okay. That's good. All right. Well, that, I don't know, we need to have a motion to table this to the next meeting. So I'll make a motion to table this agenda item to the first item for the next meeting. For Roland's suggestion. Those in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, opposed? All right, with that, then we will move on to commissioner reports. Anybody have anything? The only thing I have is just that I'm working on trying to find stuff for examples of sign elements and stuff to bring to something so we can start having meaningful discussion about that. But it's getting a small window into Trevor's world. It's not as easy as it is to just go find somebody to copy and bring back. So that's what I have.
Especially Trinidad, it's all gotta be custom.
Yes. You find a similar connection in there in the county. So you have to go to the county and future agenda items, any changes we want to talk about tonight with that? Seeing none. All right, with that, say we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.